Did Russia just expose America's $37 trillion Bitcoin reset? While we were all distracted with Christmas, Russia just made some very interesting Bitcoin moves, from banks adopting it to retail now being allowed to trade Bitcoin, and even potentially new mining laws. Russia is going all in and nobody is paying attention. What is the most, sorry, some background. What's the most interesting part about this is, in my opinion, it does seem like Russia is calling America's bluff right now. We've all heard 2025 is the year that we got the first Bitcoin president. A lot of new news around Bitcoin. We're seeing America push for Bitcoin, and yet it has been a lot of rhetoric. Well, now that bluff is being called, coming from Russia. So I do have a couple of news stories to kind of make my case here. And here is the first one. So last week on the 23rd, Russia opened the door to Bitcoin for retail investors. Essentially, a Russian central bank was proposing that, hey, we should allow everyone to start to be able to buy Bitcoin. Now, this isn't perfect. Obviously, from our perspective, we always view it in one simple way. It's like, you don't need to wait for a central bank's permission. You don't need to wait for any bank's permission to buy Bitcoin. All you have to do is find a way to get that Bitcoin. Of course, there are laws in certain countries that definitely stop you from buying Bitcoin. A lot of banks have been stopping people from buying Bitcoin, but now it looks like the Russian central bank is going to allow everyone to get into Bitcoin. Now, the saga in Russia around Bitcoin has been very interesting. For a while, we have been seeing this kind of push where they'll allow high net worth individuals to get into Bitcoin, only limited small amounts. Now it seems like it's going to be opened up for everyone, though it still has the very same limits. Of course, always with the idea of consumer protection. You know, we got to do an experiment, a test pilot. We don't really know this Bitcoin thing, so we're only going to let a few people get into it and in small amounts. And that's exactly how this is going down. So last Tuesday, there was a report submitted to the government for review that central banks said both qualified and non-qualified investors would be permitted to acquire crypto assets, but under different rules, limits, and test requirements. That's the bulk of this. Yes, they're saying, hey, you know, retail can buy Bitcoin, but only a little bit. And yeah, we're only going to really let the qualified investors get into Bitcoin in full force. But if you're just kind of a retail main street person, then, you know, we're only going to let you buy a little bit. So it is a change from what we saw coming out of Russia, where they were just kind of only allowing high net worth individuals get into Bitcoin in certain amounts. Now they're essentially saying, hey, everyone can get into Bitcoin, but if you are a qualified investor, you have obviously a little more autonomy, a little more freedom to get into Bitcoin. Now they're like, you know what? We'll let everyone get into it. But of course, if you are a retail investor, we got to protect you. We need consumer protection here. And obviously, from my perspective, I guess it's a good baby step. You know, Nico always talks about the Overton window. We've been hearing the Overton window constantly. So we are shifting in the right direction. Now, what is most interesting to me about this is obviously in 2025 in the US, we've seen the exact opposite. We've seen basically every bank in the US, every big bank either offer the Bitcoin ETFs or offer some kind of Bitcoin product for their customers here. But now it seems like that is catching on. We saw this happen everywhere around the world. Obviously, not in every country, in every jurisdiction, but ever since Trump came out and was pro-Bitcoin, every other country had to pay attention to this. Whether they're serious about this or not, everyone else is taking notice to this. And I think this is probably the biggest signal just right off the rip is maybe you don't take what President Trump is saying seriously. Maybe you don't think they're actually serious about acquiring Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin, though we have seen there has been a regulatory shift around Bitcoin, specifically coming from the SEC and the CFTC. And of course, people have been saying, you know, Operation Choke Point 2.0 is over, though it is a little interesting because there's this whole new privacy war going on. So on the one hand, there seems to be a very good pro-Bitcoin rhetoric spreading around the world. On the other hand, it doesn't seem like very many people are taking that seriously. Though, as I've been saying for a while, even though we haven't seen any buys coming from the US, we have seen a lot of favorable tailwinds coming for Bitcoin. And everyone else is starting to pay attention. Yes, China is kind of loosening their laws around it, though there's still kind of some speculation of whether China is going to ban mining again, though Bitcoin mining in China is back to levels we haven't seen in years. Now it looks like Russia is starting to take this very seriously and be like, okay, look, we may not want this, we may not like this, but I know our customers are going to look for Bitcoin. If the US is serious about Bitcoin, then we have to take it seriously as well. And I think this is just the beginning of what we are going to see. Now, the second story here, again, there is a multiple news stories, and I think this one is the most interesting story. Though, when I looked into this, I was looking at this last week, and this is why I didn't do a show. Well, obviously, I wasn't here last week, but this is why we didn't do a show on it last week, is because there is a little, I don't know if there's a caveat here, but if this is true, this is one of those big if true moments. If this is true, and I did confirm, I had to do a Russian to English translation for this, though it was interesting because it didn't really make it that clear, but there's only one real kind of direction that this could go. So I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Block reported, and I saw other people reporting this as well, that the U.S. eyes crypto mining at disputed nuclear plant in Russia-Ukraine conflict. Essentially, the short of it is, one of the main things that is hinging on the Ukraine-Russia kind of resolution right now is this nuclear plant. And it seems like the U.S. is kind of using this as an opportunity to either have a partnership with Russia at this nuclear plant to do Bitcoin mining, or it's kind of one of those kind of thrown in little side notes, footnotes to this resolution. But anyways, Putin said the U.S. has expressed interest in using a proposed stake in the, I'm going to butcher this, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant for crypto mining as part of ongoing peace negotiations. This is what's reported by the Kommersant. Again, I looked into the official report or the official Kommersant kind of press release. And when that was released, maybe I can find it here and we can do this live. It doesn't necessarily say Bitcoin or crypto mining. Here it is from the Kommersant, again, English to Russian to English translation. It goes, Putin announced the U.S. interest in mining at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Again, it just says mining. Now, from a Bitcoiner's perspective, this is one of the things we've been saying for a very long time, that once we can start, mining Bitcoin from nuclear power, it's like game over. This is when we start to really enter into the Petrosat system. Now, of course, this report only says mining. Now, maybe they didn't add crypto Bitcoin mining into that because it was so obvious. But when I kind of was thinking about this, like, what else could they, quote unquote, be mining from a power plant? From our perspective, it's like, what? They're just going to, the whole resolution is being hinged on them being able to Bitcoin mine at a nuclear power plant in Russia. It's like, if this is exactly what is being reported, this is absolutely insane. Now, do I think this is going to be like the one resolution to stop the Russia-Ukraine conflict? Probably not. It's probably an kind of just like a footnote, an afterthought here, though there has been this whole new spark conversation of, are we going to see a resolution in the Russia-Ukraine conflict? I think I saw yesterday, as I was kind of updating myself for the news, that Zelensky's apparently starting to say he's more open to peace negotiations. Though we have heard this in the past. Who knows what is actually going on over there? But from the reports, it seems like the U.S. has made a point of, hey, one of the things we want to see is this disputed nuclear power plant, whether we can mine in it. And if this is just like a very simple, hey, we just want to be able to plug some ASICs into this nuclear power plant, this is like insane game theory playing out right now. It really does go into the Jason Lowery, soft power or soft war narrative here, where one of the defining conversations right now is nation state and Bitcoin. And we're starting to see this play out everywhere right now. Obviously, US, China, Russia. We have a lot of smaller nations kind of embracing Bitcoin. We do have some Eastern European countries embracing Bitcoin. It does seem like Latin American countries are also starting to embrace Bitcoin. Of course, every institution, at least from Wall Street, is very slowly starting to embrace Bitcoin. We're seeing products everywhere. So I know 2025 did seem like a lost year. We're, you know what, 2 days, three days until the year's over. I think 2025 was the bear market, guys. You know, hopefully this is the case. This is kind of my thesis right now. But both of these news together are interesting in and of themselves, right? They're like, okay, you know, Russia's allowing their retail to get into Bitcoin, even if it's very small. We're hearing kind of some speculative rumors, though it does seem to be official rumors, or not even official, not even rumors, just official statements coming out about mining at a nuclear power plant to kind of be one of the footnotes to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. But this news that came out this morning is Russia officially going into Bitcoin, doing what Bitcoiners have been saying for a while. We've seen this happen in the US. And here is the latest news this morning, which really makes you think that Russia is very seriously taking into consideration America's rhetoric around Bitcoin. America has been saying, or rather Trump and Scott Bessent and David Sachs, you know, the crypto czar, they've all been saying one kind of meme the whole year. America is going to be the Bitcoin superpower of the world. Now, of course, the Bitcoin price has been down. There has been, you know, some very serious de-dollarization happening around the world right now. I don't know if you guys are watching silver markets, but I will cover what's going on in the silver markets a little later. We have been seeing, you know, rumors of BRICS moving away from the dollar all year long, them kind of posturing that they're going to create their own kind of new note, new currency. So whether this is happening or not, one trend is starting to emerge, and we've been saying this, or maybe rather I've been saying this all year long, is we are starting to see that the world is de-dollarizing. Add that with gold going all-time highs and central banks acquiring gold at levels we haven't seen in years and dropping treasuries at the same time. It's just going to show we are definitely in a monetary shifting, a monetary reordering currently in the moment. And as a Bitcoiner, I truly believe Bitcoin's going to be one of those pivotal, I don't want to say assets, but monies moving forward. Now, if Russia kind of continues this trend and they finally really allow Bitcoin to be used by their people, because they have been, as I've been saying, using Bitcoin from a, I don't know if I want to say like an elite perspective. It's like if you're a high net worth individual, you can get into Bitcoin, but you know, you peasants, you everyday Russian people, you guys aren't going to be able to use Bitcoin. You know, you guys aren't sophisticated enough. You need more consumer protection. But now it seems like they are opening up the kind of the floodgates into Bitcoin. And this one is very interesting because Sberbank, which is the largest lender in Russia, just issued their first crypto-backed loan to a Bitcoin miner Intelion Data. So Sberbank used its in-house crypto custody, again, in-house, just something that is a little different than what we've seen in the US. Most people are using Coinbase, but they're using their in-house crypto custody tool to back a loan for mining firm Intelion Data, signaling broader interest into crypto lending. This is, we just saw JP Morgan do this a couple of weeks ago, basically, you know, talking about MicroStrategy is bad. And then they launch a, you know, oh, we're going to launch Bitcoin back loan soon. So Sberbank issued, of course, the first backed Bitcoin loan to a major Bitcoin miner. The loan utilized their crypto custody product Root Token to secure the Bitcoin collateral, ensuring asset safety. And they're exploring decentralized finance instruments and supports the gradual legalization of cryptocurrencies in Russia. I think that's the big point here, guys. I think all of these news together is really going towards a greater trend here, that it does seem like Russia is taking the game theory threat of the U.S. embracing Bitcoin seriously. Now, I did just get back from vacation. You know, I was talking to a lot of friends. One of my friends is at Morgan Stanley, and he's just, you know, drinking the TradFi Kool-Aid. But I just kept telling him, I'm like, dude, like even your own bank is starting to embrace Bitcoin. And he's like, well, they're not letting everyone get into Bitcoin yet. I'm like, yeah, but they're embracing it. So while in the US, we still have this kind of trepidation, there's this concern around Bitcoin. There's still kind of the status quo of TradFi and Bitcoin not really mixing, even though Wall Street has fully embraced Bitcoin. In Russia, it seems like they're taking the necessary steps to finally allow Bitcoin to be used, proliferated, or at the very least, they are starting to see the strategic importance of using Bitcoin. Now, currently, what we're seeing in the precious markets, obviously gold and silver hitting all-time highs, is probably the biggest signal of what's going on. As I've been telling you guys all year long, or rather, once it really hit me, I think around summertime, that the Mar-a-Lago Accords, whether you're seeing it or you're hearing about it or not, that thesis of what the Mar-a-Lago Accords is happening in real time, which is, of course, they're going to print money. They want to lower interest rates. They want a looser monetary policy. But at the same time, they're talking about we need a strong dollar. Well, all their actions are doing the opposite. They are weakening the dollar in real time. They're trying to figure out ways to get more demand for treasuries because no one wants to hold U.S. debt anymore. And then you add in what's happening in Japan, and they're about to raise interest rates. They're injecting liquidity into their economy. It's like the money printer is turning back on. Everyone's looking at the status quo, the safe haven bets, and they're like, I don't want this anymore. So they're stacking gold. Central banks haven't acquired gold like this in decades. And now we're starting to see that, behind the scenes, the little Trojan horse, the little engine that could, Bitcoin is starting to take its place in the macro landscape. Now, what does this all mean? Especially when you consider that the institutions are slowly getting into Bitcoin, though. I mean, BlackRock coming into Bitcoin, JP Morgan coming into Bitcoin, basically all the big banks are at the very least building the foundation to get into Bitcoin, which really is my thesis for 2026, that we're only going to see that ramp up. Hence why I've maintained bullishness throughout this whole kind of bearish drama the last couple of weeks. I'm like, it just makes no sense to me. We're seeing nation states embrace Bitcoin. We're seeing all the big institutions, I hate using the term smart money, but all the smart money is starting to position themselves into Bitcoin. They move a lot slower than retail. And I have a good clip from Matt Hougan essentially explaining why he also believes it's going to be 2026 bullishness. It seems like the stepping stones have been set in 2025, and all of the kind of negative price action we've seen is really contrary to all of the good news that we've heard throughout this year. So if Russia is very seriously going to take steps into Bitcoin, then you're starting to see the monetary war is not only happening in, of course, dollars, it's not only happening in gold, but now it's starting to take place in Bitcoin. So if Russia goes in, as this said at the very end, that they're taking, steps to legalize cryptocurrencies in Russia, not that they've been necessarily illegal there per se, but there has been a lot of red tape so that people can't get into it. Your banks wouldn't allow you to buy Bitcoin, which is what we've seen in the past in America. You're starting to see that the game theory, you can't ignore it for that long. If the US is serious about becoming the quote unquote Bitcoin superpower of the world, then every other country has to take this seriously, whether they believe in Bitcoin or not, whether they think Bitcoin is a digital toy, whether they think that, this is a scam, or what are all the other things that you say, an index of money launderers and frauds and all that stuff. It's become very clear to me that 2025 is the year that Bitcoin matured, that Bitcoin is starting to be accepted into the mainstream. Like, this is us crossing that Rubicon into mainstream, because first they have to kind of, rewrite the rules so that they can let themselves participate in the Bitcoin system. And this is what we're seeing happen right now. So whether you like Trump, you hate him, whether you like Putin or you hate him, you think he's the big bad boogeyman, or maybe they're both the big bad boogeyman, they're all looking at Bitcoin right now. And I think they're having these conversations in private like, man, I don't know if they're serious about this, but we have to take that threat seriously. We have to view this as a potential alternative to what is coming down the pipeline. And especially if you're watching, again, like I said, in the silver markets, which I will cover a little bit, there's been a lot of rumors around the silver markets. It's hitting all-time highs. There's been a lot of speculation. It's really showing you a couple of things. In my opinion, I think what we're seeing is that the precious metals markets are calling the bluff of fiat money. This is, I think, exactly what's going on. It's been extremely hard to ignore the gold rally, obviously. Now silver's rallied, I think, like 25% in like 30 days. It's just something ridiculous. It's added a couple of Bitcoin market caps, and everyone's wondering, like, when's Bitcoin? This is why I think you're seeing so much hate, so much fervor, so much I would say maybe disdain. There's been a lot of salty Bitcoiners right now because we've seen gold rip all year long. We just saw silver rip, and Bitcoin's down. Literally S&P 500, NASDAQ, gold, silver, and Bitcoin's down. Everything that should be an indicator of Bitcoin ripping is taking off. All the signals are go, and Bitcoin's been down. But usually kind of the heuristic, the meme is gold runs first and then Bitcoin will run. Though I'm not really in the camp that we have to see gold lose its value, reprice, and that flows into Bitcoin. I don't think that that's necessarily the case with silver either. I have seen a lot of people talking that, okay, silver probably topped out. I really don't know, but I will cover that in a minute. I don't think we have to see precious metals reprice and dump for Bitcoin to run. I think what we're seeing is the general kind of apathy of the markets right now, and maybe they're just fear of what's going on. Though I no longer really believe that we are necessarily going to see doom and gloom and a recession or a depression necessarily happen for Bitcoin to run. I think we are on the verge of a potential melt up situation. So it's not like the past where all markets are going to tank. I think it's the opposite. I think we're going to see markets rip so hard that if you aren't holding assets, which has been my thesis all year long, if you are not holding assets right now, you are absolutely going to be wrecked and devastated. They've been telling us this very directly throughout the whole year. We want to run this hot. And again, 2026 is a midterm election in the US. The economy's in the dumps. Yes, the official narratives is like the economy's better than ever. Welcome to the golden age. And yet everyone feels broker than they've ever felt before. Like, make the math here. So my kind of updated view right now, or rather maybe what I'm leaning towards the most, is I think we're going to see a melt up situation. All assets are going to run insane. As we saw with gold, as we've seen with silver, I think Bitcoin will follow in 2026 in this type of scenario where Bitcoin just does an incredible run, as we saw in the other precious metals. To me, I think melt up situation is probably more favorable, or rather, I think the odds of a melt up situation is most likely what's going to happen, not necessarily a recession, depression. I think we've been in a recession. So I don't think we're going to see a depression level crash. I think we're going to see the opposite, a melt up, upwards crash where all the assets just add huge amounts of capital and liquidity. I think Bitcoin will follow that as well. It's just the game theory is starting to get crazy. You can no longer ignore Bitcoin. And I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway here. Whether the US is serious about acquiring Bitcoin or not, everyone is now very serious about essentially legalizing or finishing the framework so that they can get into Bitcoin. Again, they do have to basically rewrite the laws so that they can get their capital into Bitcoin. And I think if this news from Russia is pointing in any direction, it's that the game theory around Bitcoin as a macro asset, I don't know if we can even call it a macro hedge anymore, because it didn't act like a hedge this year. It acted like a risk on asset. So I think that's the framework that we should be working on right now. I think Bitcoin is growing up. It grew up. This is its I don't want to say coming out party, pause, but this is Bitcoin maturing, going into the mainstream, and now everyone having to kind of scramble and figure out, hey, are we playing chicken here? Is Russia playing chicken with the US? Is the US playing chicken with their quote unquote embracing of Bitcoin? Is China playing chicken? China's been just stacking gold. I think they're kind of doing the same thing they did in the past where they acquired silver, though, again, I will get into the kind of silver drama that happened over the weekend. But if the U.S. does very strongly embrace Bitcoin, start to acquire Bitcoin, then I think the game theory between Russia, the U.S., and China is going to go into overdrive, and they're going to be forced to embrace Bitcoin. Now, will they do that only on a nation-state level and basically leave the little man out? Potentially. That's probably the case if we're being honest here. But you're starting to see a trend coming out of Russia that they are very seriously calling America's bluff on the quote-unquote Bitcoin superpower of the world. So from my perspective as American, if America doesn't get its shit together, it's going to get crazy. If they don't start acquiring Bitcoin, it's going to get nuts. If they don't essentially on a state level realize that, hey, we got to let our citizens embrace Bitcoin, who knows who can eat our lunch? Is it going to be China? Is it going to be Russia? I want us to be, literally, because I live here, the Bitcoin superpower of the world. I really want them to just get out of our way. Let us use Bitcoin as money. That would really solve all of my personal problems. I think all of your problems out there. But Russia is taking Bitcoin's superpower strategy seriously, which I think is the main signal here. If you've been watching Bitcoin stuff and you're only watching the Bitcoin price and you're not really focused on all of the very bullish news around Bitcoin, then you might not understand that the dynamics are changing. Still waters run deep. Yes, the Bitcoin price has been down. I didn't check it this morning, but it's down like 6-7% on the year. But the fundamental plumbing has changed, and now everyone has to take Bitcoin seriously. So, look, I think things are changing. I know. I'm saying it's different, but this time is very clearly different. Everything is different. I don't need to make the case for why I think this is different, but you are starting to see on a nation-state level, they cannot ignore Bitcoin anymore. Now, obviously, are they going to do everything in my eyes favorable? No, but they can't ignore Bitcoin anymore. Bitcoin is here. It's not going away. They have to find ways to embrace it, maybe find ways to embrace it where they don't lose their power, but it's here and it's unignorable at this point. So Russia seemingly going all in on Bitcoin. They're starting to unleash some products. They're starting to allow their citizens to save in Bitcoin, invest or trade Bitcoin, however you want to call it. But Russia is taking Bitcoin's or America's Bitcoin moves very seriously. So that's what I think is very interesting. The game theory, the macro around Bitcoin's place in the world has fundamentally shifted in 2025. I think that's the biggest bullish takeaway for today. And, I will rest my hat on that one. All right, guys, before I go on, it's good to be back, boys. I know you guys had to deal with a week of bearishness, but Simply Hopium with Optimus Fields is back. All right, we are back. Thank you for bearing with us. I'll make sure we stay bullish. All right, we're going to stay bullish going into 2026. Anyways, for you guys later, like I said in the news, I will be covering the silver stuff. There's been a lot of rumors. There's a lot of confusion of what's going on in the silver markets, though it's hitting all-time high. It did retrace today. And then I have a clip from Matt Hougan. I'm kind of a fan of Matt Hougan right now. He's doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the 4-year cycle being dead. And he's making an interesting case on maybe following gold's 10-year bull run. And then I do have a guest popping in a minute. We have let me get the his name because I'm blanking here. We have Eric from Coin Lords coming in, so we'll be talking about that in the culture. On that note, guys, I will be right back after this commercial break.
Today's episode is brought to you by Bitcoin Well Infinite. If you're a serious Bitcoin buyer, you've probably hit the same wall. Most platforms make you give up custody just to play by the rules. Bitcoin Well Infinite fixes that. They're North America's only publicly traded, non-custodial OTC desk listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, which means transparent operations and zero counterparty risk.
You buy Bitcoin, you take immediate control, period. For For trades over $50,000, you get a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, competitive spread starting at 1%, and immediate delivery straight to your own wallet. No custody risk, no withdrawal fees, just institutional grade execution with full asset control. If you want to buy Bitcoin the right way, book a free consultation at bitcoinwell.com/OTC or email infinite@bitcoinwell.com.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Stampseed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed phrases really secure? Stampseed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need for you to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of just writing them down on paper. Paper is fragile. Titanium plates are strong. Your words are actually stamped into the titanium plate with this hammer and these letter stamping tools. Once the words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They're also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and time-proof. And now you can customize your titanium seed plates. You can upload your design or logo, and they will laser engrave it on the back of your seed plate, the opposite side of where the words are. Stamp your seed on Stampseed and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the stampseed.com store.
Alrighty then, guys, we are back, and the current Bitcoin price is $87,730, which is a 30% discount from all-time high. The market cap is currently 1.75 trillion, and the current block height is 930,045. I repeat, 930,045. All right, so as I was telling you, look, you guys saw me and Nico arguing before I left whether we're in the 4-year cycle. What even means the 4-year cycle? I think that's probably where the confusion comes into. But as we all know, 2025 is seemingly going to be a bear market. Now, if this is our bear market, I'm totally okay with that, because it really just shows what we've been hearing from all the institutions, essentially say Bitcoin volatility is going to kind of, not be as extreme as it used to be. If 2025 is the bull market and 2026 is bullish, well, the 4-year cycle is completely broken, but also we didn't see the declines that we'd expect in a bear market, which in my opinion is super bullish. So Matt Hougan from Bitwise, he's kind of making the case the 4-year cycle's over, but he's even more bullish than just, hey, 4-year cycle's over. He's saying we could be seeing a 10-year grind up, which is a little bittersweet. I think super bullish, but let's hear his framing, and then I'll kind of chat about it.
I think the 4-year cycle is being replaced by a 10-year grind, by which I mean there are big new forces in the world. They started coming in with the launch of the ETF in January of 2024. They were accelerated by regulatory progress in January of this year. We have the growth of stablecoins and tokenization. I think those forces are bigger and stronger than the forces that historically caused the 4-year cycle. So specifically, I expect the market to be up next year. And so therefore, from that perspective, I think the 4-year cycle is quote unquote dead. I still think it matters because it's in people's minds. I think it's one of the reasons prices have been suppressed this year. But do I think we're in a 4-year cycle? No. I think we're in a 10-year grind upward of strong returns, not spectacular returns, strong returns, lower volatility, some up and down. But I think next year will be up. And so I guess from that perspective, I think the 4-year cycle is quote unquote dead. I'll just add one more fun fact from Bitwise's perspective. I think the institution is just sort of hitting its stride. I don't think crypto is used to how slow those institutions moved. As 2 examples, we just now had the big 4 wirehouses, Morgan, Merrill, Wells, and UBS, approve Bitcoin products, even though the ETFs launched in January. So we're just opening the doors. The other experience from Bitwise's perspective, our average institutional client allocates after 8 meetings. If they do meetings on a quarterly basis, and they started when ETFs launched, they're just getting to their 8th meeting now. So I do think you have this slow-moving force and then this fast-moving retail trade, and I think that explains a lot of what's going on.
All right, guys. So first off, if you are unfamiliar with how commodities trade, you might be looking at the initial kind of first point of 4-year cycle dead, but a 10-year super cycle is in, and you're probably thinking like, dude, all right, simply hopium. Like I can only smoke so much hopium. I get it. Though he totally did say that we might not be seeing the spectacular Bitcoin gains that we're used to, which is, 5, 10, 20 plus X in, a 1-year cycle, or sorry, a 4-year cycle, but in 1 year. But what you'll see is, I think, probably more akin to what Saylor's been saying, a 30% CAGR, though we didn't even see that this year. So, hey, that one might be out the window. But what I would kind of say to you to look at is you got to look at gold. Gold had essentially, a 10-year mega cycle, and then it went down for a long time. And now it's finally hitting all-time highs again. So that 10-year super cycle kind of idea is very prevalent in a lot of commodities. I was looking at the S&P 500 this morning, and if you turn it on the monthly chart, it's literally been pumping up since 1940s. You're like, yo, this is crazy. So it's not unheard of to see something like Bitcoin just pump up forever and not necessarily just be a 4-year cycle meme. Though the second part of it was, I think, where Nico kind of falls into. 1 second. I think where Nico kind of falls into is where Matt Hougan was saying at the tail end of that first segment, where he's like, I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of people do really believe in the 4-year cycle. And it is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is kind of a negative feedback loop. A lot of my really good friends have also really believed this. It's like, the 4chan post said Bitcoin's going to hit all-time highs at October 26th. And look, it hit all-time high 126 on October 26th. Look, bro, 4-year cycle intact. And therefore, they're trading. They're trying to get sell tops, to buy lower. Though, I'm not going to lie, my friend had a pretty good call. If you are more of a trader type, you could be calling some local tops and buying local bottoms. But I just don't see the prolonged bear market playing out like it used to, specifically because what Matt Hougan said at the very end. Every institution on Wall Street is very seriously taking Bitcoin into consideration, whether it's allowing Bitcoin ETFs, whether it's launching their own Bitcoin products, whether it's doing Bitcoin-backed loans, whether it's some form of custody, whether it's just allowing Bitcoin in, their trading accounts. It's like they are taking Bitcoin seriously. And one little tidbit on that clip that I wasn't really aware of is Matt Hougan. He's like, look, every time we've talked to an institution, it's taken about 8 meetings for them to very seriously consider allowing Bitcoin. And if that is on a quarterly basis, what's that, about 2 years? I mean, the timing for 2026 for these institutions to come into Bitcoin in full force is playing out exactly as he just described. Yes, the ETF was launched in 2024. It's been, roughly 2 years, but only recently in 2025 did we see a lot of the institutions start to come out and be like, look, Bitcoin's going to do something. We need to get into this. And I think the biggest kind of smoking gun scenario is what we saw from JP Morgan. They fudded strategy. They fudded Bitcoin. Turns out, of course, they own a lot of stock in strategy. Then basically at the extreme bottom of this last dump, they launched a Bitcoin product. I think it's all playing out exactly as I've been saying for a while. The institutions are taking our lunch. If you are trading right now, you are trading against the behemoth that is Wall Street. And personally, I know I can't match that. So what do? I just store my Bitcoin. I accumulate more Bitcoin. I shit post about Bitcoin. And life's good, man. I'm just not convinced we're going to see an extreme drawdown like we've seen in the past. As of now, my thesis has been pretty good. While Nico was calling 30K when we dropped to the 80K lows, I told you guys I think it's going to go sideways. What's the price done? It's gone sideways. I'm just saying, I think we are underestimating what an unlimited bid looks like. I think we're totally underestimating what it looks like when institutions want to accumulate a position. If you are watching like the 1 hour charts right now, if you're watching what's happening in the leverage, they're cleaning up out there. They're cleaning all of the leverage. 1 hour, they're killing all of the shorts. The next hour, they're killing all of the longs. Like the chart on the 1 hour is just BART central. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down, it's sideways. Dude, they are cleaning up in leverage right now. And from my perspective, it's essentially saying they want your coin. So the only way to ensure that you don't give them your coin is you don't trade it. You just accumulate and you put it in the cold storage. That is the winning play. The winning play is long term. You want to accumulate this for the long term, especially now that we have all the biggest institutions and all of the nation states starting to really talk about getting into Bitcoin. You think you're going to outtrade, all of these institutions? Like you're literally picking up nickels in front of a steamroller. Yes, we all want more Bitcoin. Yes, you want the dopamine rush of 100x leverage win here, but don't play those games. Just acquire Bitcoin, take it into cold storage, because who knows what is going on. I think Max Payne has always been that the true believers are trying to trade tops and bottoms right now, and a tsunami comes and Bitcoin just does what gold and silver's done. The meme of, Bitcoin's market cap is so big, it can never get, 100x, 200x gains here anymore, or 100% on the year. Gold just blew that out of the water. Silver just blew that out of the water. They have bigger market caps. Why don't you think Bitcoin can do that? Just stay humble, stack sats, stay solvent. This is the way. I could be wrong, but I'm becoming more and more convinced by the day that we're not going to see an 80% drawdown like we've seen in the past. I think it's going to go sideways, and then we're going to start ripping here soon. So that's my case. That's what I've been telling you guys. That's how I'm thinking of this. And if I'm vindicated, then you guys can all point back to my old shows and be like, look, somehow Opti got it right. Somehow the 42 IQ macro quant at Simply Bitcoin got it right. That'll be the day when I really hit the map, is when I call this right. When me and British Hotto are the only ones that stayed bullish throughout this and everyone got bearish. Shame on you guys. Shame on you. All right, guys. Opti classifieds here. Low. I don't know about that, dude. I'm just look. My whole thing was, I know what Bitcoin's done, but it didn't do what I thought it was going to do this year. So you guys saw me mid-year. I started to look into what's going on in the macro landscape, what Trump's doing, what all these tariffs are doing, what's going on globally, and then seeing Bitcoin is being accepted and all of that. And so I had to fundamentally update how I view this. And a lot of it was going into, posts and articles that I didn't even fundamentally believe in. But as the year progressed, all I kept thinking was, there is something going on here. There is a monetary reordering happening, and just trying to find where Bitcoin's position is in that. And I think it's going to become the thing. Like, my thesis on Bitcoin hasn't changed. I think Bitcoin will be the fundamental best performing asset, moving forward. Yes, gold and silver had a good year on us. I'm not one of these haters, these doomers. I'm like, yo, if you've been holding gold or silver for a decade, here's your flowers. You guys were right. Like, we all have the same fundamental thesis. They're just outperforming us this year. And I'm not one of these haters that's like mad at silver or gold for doing what it does. I congratulated my dad over the holidays. I'm like, dude, good trade, bro. Your silver's up. Your gold is up. Like, good trade, bro. But we're fundamentally built from the same cloth. Anyways, enough of that. I'll be right back. One more commercial, and then we're going to go into the silver drama.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin, the leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. Unlock the liquidity in your Bitcoin without having to sell your Bitcoin. They've issued $9 billion in loans to over 10,000 customers since 2018. I absolutely love these guys. Not only do I have an account with them, but I also have a loan. And what I love about them is that there are no monthly payments, and you could pay back the loan at any time. As soon as you send your Bitcoin as collateral, you'll have cash in your account within 24 hours. Over 1,000 five-star customer reviews, and they've never lost a single dollar or sat of customer money. Go to learn.ledn.io/simply today, and you'll get 0.25% off your first loan. I want to give a shout out to our partner, sat123.com. Sovereignty isn't just about your money. It's about your communications too. When the grid goes down, most people go dark. Cell towers fail in hurricanes, cyber attacks, and blackouts. But satellite phones, they don't rely on local infrastructure. Iridium has 77 satellites in orbit, giving you a direct line anywhere in the US, even offshore. If you hold your own Bitcoin keys, you should hold your own comms too. Sat123.com also has everything you need to start building your Bitcoin citadel. Starlink, battery backups, Faraday bags to protect your hardware wallets, and much, much more. It's a one-stop shop for anyone serious about resilience and off-grid independence. Stay connected, stay independent, stay sovereign. Go to sat123.com/simply today and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, BitKey. If you already self-custody your Bitcoin, you know the deal with hardware wallets by now. Complex setups, clumsy interfaces, and a seed phrase that can be lost, stolen, or forgotten. BitKey fixes that. BitKey is a multi-sig hardware wallet built by the team behind Square and Cash App. It packs a cryptographic recovery system and built-in inheritance feature into an intuitive, easy-to-use wallet with no seed phrase to sweat over. It's simple, secure, self-custody without the stress. Time named BitKey one of the best inventions of 2024. Get 20% off at bitkey.world. That's BITKEY.world with the code SIMPLY.
All right, guys. So you guys know we've been trying some stuff up. So I got Eric here, which is the CEO and the public board and author of Coin Lords, the Bitcoiner comic. You guys know about Coin Lords. So Eric, thank you so much for coming on today's show. Hopefully we troubleshooted it on the back end. I know you can hear me, but can I hear you? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Can you hear me? I got you loud and clear.
I got you. All right, cool. We are good to go. You guys, we're adjusting things here a little bit on the show so that we can give you guys a lot of content. But all right, so Eric, I am going to go into what's going on in the silver markets right before we go into the culture and talk about Coin Lords. So if you have thoughts on the silver markets, by all means, jump in. If not, I could rip too, and we can continue the convo in the culture. But here we go, guys. Here's a good headline here. And then I'll dive into all the rumors and speculations and all of that stuff of what's going on. But I think this is a good headline coming from Yahoo. So Bitcoin attracts capital flight as silver futures margin call crisis triggers liquidity shock. Wow, that was a tongue twister. All right, so if you aren't familiar with what's going on, over the weekend, silver hit an all-time high. It went basically to $84, and then it collapsed 10% literally in like an hour. So as we've been watching the last couple of weeks, silver's been running, which is the trend we've been seeing all year long. Gold ran, then silver went parabolic. And as Bitcoiners, we're just sitting here like, what the hell is going on? Like, when is it Bitcoin's turn to run? But what this, I think, is telling us about not only just the economy in general, but what traders' kind of perspectives are, or kind of maybe what their fears are, I think is probably the bigger picture. And I don't know if you guys were on Twitter, but Elon Musk is tweeting like, well, this is not good because, of course, silver is used in a lot of chips and manufacturing. Like, the utility use of silver is what's the main importance going on in the broader macro picture. Though there are silver bugs out there that look at silver like a monetary asset. Of course, silver coins are cool. You can buy, ounce of silvers. So like there are people that still believe in silver as a monetary asset. From my perspective, I always joke that, silver has been demonetized for a long time. So, have fun with your silver. But hey, I love a silver eagle coin.
I'm totally guilty of that, bro. I'm totally guilty. Like, and I know to my defense, I bought silver way before I knew about Bitcoin. It was, I kind of recognized anyone that's read like Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, and really got a sense of, what's going on at a macro scale is like, okay, well, there's something that we have to hedge against. So I was buying silver and gold way before I knew about Bitcoin, but I've held it on principle just because, holding a coin like that. You know what? I think that anyone that hasn't done it yet, just hold a gold coin in your hand, feel its weight, feel a whole ounce coin of gold to know what it feels like to hold something that's had, genuine wealth for thousands of years. Not this paper bullshit, like holding something that has that kind of weight. It changes your perspective on what value is and what money was supposed to be and what it's supposed to represent. And I'm not saying buy it or whatever. I mean, obviously stack sats, but even if you just buy maybe one or something, but just hold it is all I'm trying to say. And think about, there was a time when that was the representation of true wealth, when a physical metal like that for thousands of years was the only way or the best way to store wealth or do a transfer or do an exchange in a system. Just get that feeling and then sort of, look at Bitcoin differently, or then look at the world a bit differently. But anyways, I'm totally guilty of holding those silver coins, and I got like a whole thing of them. You hear that sound, man. I know this is probably the wrong visual for holding silver, but you jiggle your silver in your hands, and it changes your perspective of money.
Yeah, 100%. Hey, look, I've told this to everyone on the show before as well. Look, I'm not a gold bug, but when you hold gold, like there's something to it. It makes you
it's
feel
heavy.
better, not just its weight, but I think it's like the conductivity of gold. You're just like, oh man, I feel so good. Anyway, let me get back to the silver markets, which I think I saw someone in the chat who cares about what's going on with silver. I think this is telling us a lot about what's going on in just the macroeconomic picture at large. So at the center of what we saw go with silver, it hit all-time high to $84, and then its subsequent kind of 10% crash was this rumor. It was an unverified report circulating on Twitter that a systemically important bank failed to meet a massive silver margin call and was forcibly liquidated by a futures exchange in the early hours of December 28. Now, this is, again, unsubstantiated. We can't really find any actual source material that this is true, though, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some floating bodies down the river soon. But as of now, this is pure rumor, speculation, most likely fake news. But what did come out after this was very interesting, because the official rumor was essentially like JP Morgan filed with the SEC and they got liquidated and yada yada. That was never that was just basically fake news. But what we did see is that JP Morgan did flip from short selling silver to going long on silver. And I think that is kind of the big news that we're seeing here, where it's like, okay, look, silver's running. A lot of people are saying that, there's a bank that's going to blow up because of silver margin calls. But in reality, JP Morgan just became the biggest holder in silver, which is showing you a lot of things going on in the economy at large. And of course, a lot of people, since this is a Bitcoin show, it's like, what does this matter for Bitcoin? I don't care what's going on in silver. I'm not holding silver. I'm sick of applauding gold and silver do a run. I want to know what this is going to do to Bitcoin. And of course, this is probably where there's a lot of speculation. A lot of people are saying, hey, once gold kind of cools off, it's going to flow into Bitcoin. Once silver cools off, that's going to flow into Bitcoin. I don't necessarily believe that that's the case. I don't think they have to crash for Bitcoin to go up. I think what this is showing us is the general de-dollarization trend that we are seeing go around the world. No one wants treasuries. They either want gold or, maybe they want some silver right now. But I think that's the greater trend that we're seeing right now, is people are looking away from fiat money. That's the greater trend that we're seeing. People do not want to hold fiat money because there is so much uncertainty, because there has been a lot of fraud being uncovered in the last couple of weeks. Everyone is starting to realize what we've realized a long time ago, that the trust in these institutions is corroding in real time. The demise of fiat money is happening in a slow motion train crash right now. And we are, we're like the Big Short right now. We're just so early that we look dumb and we're wrong. That's where we are right now. So here we go. While metal traders were being forced out, Bitcoin began moving in the opposite direction. Crypto Rover noted that silver dropped roughly 11% as crypto prices began to surge. This is a little outdated because Bitcoin did go up and then it crashed. So, this is a little outdated. So, Bitcoin did kind of catch a little bit of it. It did hit 90K and then it crashed to like 87K. But we are starting to see that like the collapse story is fiction, but the position flip from JP Morgan filed with the SEC is real. And the distinction matters for us because the key signal was not a headline. Rather, it was how fast liquidity moved once leverage cracked. And of course, we all knew December 26th, the whole, options expiry, box options expiry happened. So this is what we are starting to see. There has been historical, for better or worse way to put it, price manipulation in gold and silver. But once those mechanisms are stopped or cleared, you see how fast gold and silver can run. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing right now with Bitcoin as well. We're seeing the institutions, I believe, wanting to, get a good position in Bitcoin. This is why, again, as I've been telling you, the start time, or rather the opening position for Wall Street to get into Bitcoin was 100K. They wanted to get a discount. We've been seeing a lot of manipulation on the leverage price kind of action. Bunch of longs liquidated, bunch of shorts liquidated. Bitcoin's been kind of squeezed in this 80 to 90K range. But it does seem that on Friday, most of the options and leverage expired. Obviously, there's probably some front running where they're repositioning themselves. But we do know that once all of the leverage gets cleared, then Bitcoin can fundamentally start moving how it usually moves, just pure supply demand dynamics. So very interesting stuff to say the least in what's going on with silver. From a more like doomer perspective, I think it is kind of showing us that there are cracks in the system and people are calling the dollar's bluff in gold and silver. And I think that is like the greater trend we're seeing. A lot of people are looking at the same data we're looking at and they're like, yeah, I do not want to be in dollars. I need to buy assets, whatever asset that is, because as I said in the beginning of the show, I think we're on the verge of a melt up scenario and we're seeing gold and silver melt up in real time. Now, I just think, I guess we got to have a little patience to see Bitcoin melt up as well, because, I'm not going to lie, guys, it hasn't felt good watching gold and silver run while Bitcoin's been down. Literally every asset but Bitcoin has been running this year. And I think that's all part of the plan. Like, I think they wanted us to capitulate our Bitcoin. And some people did. And I'm just glad that I didn't. And I want to be vindicated and see Bitcoin melt up as well. And, I don't want to do the like, haha, I told you so. But, I'm going to be doing that. And I feel bad for my friends that are going to get caught offside. So anyways, enough ranting. Eric, since you do have a little more experience with silver, what are your views watching silver run to all-time highs like we saw over the weekend? And then did you catch the rumors about a bank being insolvent and getting liquidated? What's your thoughts on this whole saga?
Like, I've been holding silver since probably 2000, I guess, 14 or 15 or 13 or something like that is when the first time I jumped in, which was a bit before I heard about Bitcoin. And, obviously it's nice to see something you're holding go up, but that's the thing. You got to look at the big picture. You got to look at the big picture perspective. Like in the last, year, sure, we're looking great. But if I had bought Bitcoin in 2013 and put the same amount of money in Bitcoin, or put half of it, or put 10% of that money into Bitcoin and swapped it over and stored value that way instead, it would be a very different story. So there's so much short-term thinking that I see in the market, and I get it. That's, when the price chart moves or number goes up or number goes down or someone makes a move or, a politician makes a statement, it gets people excited, it gets people engaged, and that's what brings attention to this ecosystem, which is why you cover so much of this in the show, and I'm grateful for it because I don't have time to look at every single detail. But I always tell people to look at the macro perspective, and sure, like my Bitcoin, my silver just went up more than my Bitcoin, technically speaking, within a shorter time span. But if you just zoom out a little bit, the joke's on me. Right? The joke's on me for holding silver a long time ago and for not giving Bitcoin a proper due diligence way back in 2013, 14. And I think that everyone needs to really, let that sink in for a second. That this isn't a 6-month game. It's not a 1-year game. It's not a 2-year game, and it's not a 10-year game. Right? This is a 100-year game. We're talking about generational wealth that's being destroyed, or generational wealth that's being created and saved. Right? And so we have to look at the macro if we're going to look at and compare anything to Bitcoin, right? We could look at how the price went down in Bitcoin today, and how the price of shoes went up. You know what I mean? It's like anything is weird when you look at it in the small scale capacity. But on the big one, I wish I had have taken Bitcoin a little bit more seriously back in 2013 and 14. I just didn't. So the best time to do something right was yesterday, but the second best time to do something right is today. I'm not buying any more silver, right? I'm stacking sats, and that's what I think we should always be doing. If we all believe in having a long-term prosperous future, and in an economy that's stable, and finding a way to resolve national debt in a sustainable way forward, then we should be stacking sats, right? If you're into the short game and just trying to stack fiat, sure, go buy some silver and play with it, I guess, if you want, right? And now again, like I do like to hold a little bit of silver, so I think there's a value in having that experience. But in terms of storage of wealth, I think there's a lot of better ways to do that. And I think that some of the concerns, obviously, with the economic impact of silver going up are valid, but they're a separate topic than storage of wealth and dealing with government corruption and watching all of our wealth deteriorate through inflation while we go out and drink because it's New Year's Eve. There's So anyways, that's a little rant for me, but Bitcoin and stacking stats is the way to go. And my perspective on silver is in summary just that. I would have been a lot better stacking sats, and I hope that I don't ever repeat that error, and that no one else can say, "Oh, damn it!" I heard Eric and Opti talking on Simply Bitcoin, and I bought silver because it was exciting, and I wish I bought sats. I hope no one runs into that in 5 years from now.
Yeah, no, 100%. I to your point of in a this 1 year time frame, like, I think we could give the gold bugs and the silver bugs all of their flowers, all of their dues, because
I waited 10 years for that run. It was deserved.
Right? Exactly. Like, so I just went home and spent holidays with my family, and I talked to my dad, who's like, he's a gold bug, he's a silver bug, and I was telling him, I was asking him, I'm like, yo, so like, at what price did you buy silver, and how long have you been waiting? And he's like, oh, it's a great investment, like, I doubled or tripled my money, but it's been like 10 years or something like that. And you're like, okay. And I think actually it was longer. I think he said like maybe 10, 20 years. And I'm like, all right, well, hey, I'm happy for you, Dad. I'm glad you finally made your money. I'm glad your investment's paying off, but I don't know if I could have waited 10, 20 years for, to really climb out of a bear market like that. But in the short term, it is interesting to see what's going on Twitter. All the silver bugs are coming out. It's like, you crypto guys are idiots. We got, I don't even know what the gains are. Like 70% gains on the year, man. It happened so quickly. And you're like, yeah, but zoom out. Since Bitcoin's creation, you've missed out on a lot of gains. If you only care about the fiat gains, you're missing out on a lot of them if you're not buying Bitcoin. So totally agree with that.
200% gains sounds wonderful, but you spread it out over 11 years or 10 years, you're looking at 19% annual. And there's a lot of stocks that outperformed that ROI. There's an enormous amount of stocks. It's just a little bit over, a moderate portfolio in a standard mutual fund, really, at that point. So it's exciting to look at a small chart and say that it was the best investment ever. But yeah, if you look at the macro and you compare it side by side to a Bitcoin chart, there is no comparison. It's embarrassing to say that silver outperformed Bitcoin when you look at the macro chart, because it's not true.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. But hey, I'm going to let my dad enjoy this moment. I'm going to let him enjoy this one. But
I'm still not selling my silver. I still want to hold it because I'm an idiot. I can't help it.
Right? Hey, it does feel good. Look, the one thing precious metals and gold bugs and silver bugs have on us is that you can actually hold your gold and silver. Okay. I can hold my hardware wallet, but I can't actually hold a Bitcoin in my hand. So I guess it trumps us on that one.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that, everyone right now in North America has been holding paper. They've been holding something fake. Right. And ever since 1971, gold standard was completely removed. There's been no true holding money in your hand. That's not a thing that people do. It used to be the case that paper money represented real money, but it's not. And so to hold that coin, like I said earlier, it's the first time that I truly held actual money, actual value, not something that's been ponzified and scammed and just diluted. So that and it changes the concept to think of money differently that way, to really acknowledge that in one hand I'm holding this piece of paper, in the other hand I'm holding something heavy that's real. That's worth the experiment alone. And then of course the natural evolution happens and you go to stack sats and then you can't hold anything again. But
full circle, time's a flat circle, time's a flat circle. Oh man. All right, guys, one last commercial break and we'll be right back to talk with Eric about Coin Lords, the Bitcoin comic. We'll be right back in 1 minute.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy, HIVE has quadrupled its global Bitcoin mining footprint and channels that same scale into high performance compute, where their AI cloud is now ranked #1 in the world for network performance. At HIVE, you've got dual engines, Bitcoin and AI humming, roaring, accelerating in unison. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're rewriting the playbook on sustainable digital infrastructure. You can catch the latest buzz at Hive Digital Tech or at hivedigitaltech.com. I want to give a shout out to our partner, bitcoinben.io. If you're into freedom, Bitcoin, and building a real community, this is for you. Gain exclusive access to real-world, members-only, private clubs across the globe, featuring poker nights, expert-led classes, co-working spaces, educational meetups, live events, and more. Current locations include Sarasota, Nashville, Boston, Dallas, Las Vegas, and St. Louis, with new clubs launching soon in West Palm Beach, Scottsdale, Alabama, and beyond. Not to mention Bitcoin Ben's resorts in El Salvador. There's 3 of them, and they're absolutely beautiful. You'll also get access to the first fully backed Bitcoin bank with fiat ramps and savings accounts. It's called Private Key Bank. And you guessed it, it's based out of El Salvador. Go peer-to-peer with Bitcoin bulk buys. Tap into home equity for long-term Bitcoin growth. And join their exclusive mining pools if you're interested in mining. What are you waiting for? Head over to bitcoinben.io. Join today, where Bitcoin meets freedom.
All righty then, guys. We are back. Before I show everyone something really cool that Eric did, let's talk about Coin Lords real quick, and then we'll talk about what you're working on besides Coin Lords. Let me pull up your website real quick. And for those that don't know, what is Coin Lords, Eric, and what is the mission here? And then I'll talk about your other missions that you're doing that we were a part of.
Thanks. And Coin Lords, it's an artistic exploration into what does it look like when Bitcoin reaches its end goal? What does the future look like when corruption is abolished? When productive free minds are liberated to produce value unhindered, like anywhere before? You think of it, anyone that's read Atlas Shrugged from Ayn Rand and knows about John Galt and the Galt's Gulch. What if the Gulch became a planet, right? And what if government stepped out of our way and allowed the most productive minds on this planet to produce without any holdbacks? What does that mean for nanotechnology and space travel and for just general consumer products and for farming and for fill in the blank metaphysics and manipulating our amino acids to extend human life? Like, what does it look like when we have nothing standing in our way from the most productive minds to enhance our species? And Star Trek has their own version, and Star Wars has a version, and every sci-fi nerd out there has their own version. And Coin Lords is my interpretation of it, right? It's not something I do for money. It's not something I intend to make money from. It's to help Bitcoiners truly control the narrative as we go into mainstream. One thing that would make me really sad is to see a future where the first major Bitcoin show or Bitcoin series or Bitcoin narratives hit mainstream in a way that does not truly represent the Bitcoiner philosophies or ideologies. Something that it incorporated, that had a bunch of shitcoins in there, or had, CBDCs in there, or something that, perverted the narrative that we all believe in so strongly. So the Coin Lords is a glimpse into 500 years in the future, when Bitcoin does succeed on a mother planet, just like Earth, and that allows our species to excel in every aspect, and so our lifespans get longer, right? Our ability to inhabit other planets happens. Our ability to construct civilizations with nanotech and quantum mechanics really becomes materialized. And so we become an interplanetary species with 200 planets. And when we start to expand in different planets, you end up with unique scenarios where some planets embrace freedom and other planets revert back into determinism and back into like a George Orwell 1984 theory, which is what you see on the animation right there. And so you get these conflicts that are more interplanetary. So instead of having your little, our little Bitcoin community online or living in Galt's Gulch, like in Ayn Rand, we have an entire planet of maximalists that live on planet Satoshi that essentially represent and uphold what freedom is meant to be across the galaxy. And they sense, they have like the sensors that can detect a free mind. Anyone that's watched V for Vendetta, if you remember when V freed his mind from his prison and then goes through the same process with Evie, and Evie needs to free her mind and prove that she freed it in order to be in the inner circle. Anyone that's read, Shrugged again, John had created a technology that can sense a human's voice and determine whether or not it's an honest vibration or a live vibration, and it'll allow someone to unlock a door or not, or go into the gulch or not. And so the brain emits a brainwave when it lies or when it does anything. And so this is a glimpse into a future where maximalists can actually detect when someone has freed their mind, like in V for Vendetta, and we'll go and rescue those people and work with them and help them go to the next steps in their path and protect them when needed. And so in the comic, it's a whole lore, like a Lord of the Rings lore. There's 5 different character archetypes. There's the maximalist, which is everything I've just described, and we all know what a maximalist is. There's a miner, which is very Mandalorian in essence, where miners live on a planet. So there was in the storyline, there was a planet Gox that got invaded by the Hooded Ones and was ultimately destroyed. And there was 2 girls that were rescued from planet Gox, and one of them was recruited into the mining society and saved into the miners universe. And the miners really live for mining. That's their modus operandi. And so they found a planet that was full of ice and dug down to the center to install a cave network, kind of like dwarves in Lord of the Rings, to install their miners and borrow the cooling of the planet's natural ice. And in exchange, the heating slowly melted the planet's surface of ice to reveal a thriving ecosystem in like a symbiotic nature. But by being deep underground, they're protected from detection from the Hooded Ones deep under the Earth's under that planet's atmosphere and under its surface. So that's the mining world, which you think about like a tattoo that has nanotech embedded into it, and just it absorbs the heat from your body to do mining on a nano level. And so you have like a whole civilization of just people that are wearing nano tattoos that are mining just by being in existence, the ultimate decentralization of a mining network. And then you have the day traders that are kind of like the shamanistic version of my interpretation of shamanistic energy in a Bitcoin universe, where you can where the shamans can actually, the day traders can sense fear and greed in a market or manipulate fear and greed. It's like an energy force they can see and walk into any planet and instill fear on the population and capitalize on that fear to benefit themselves. So or they can do something good. They can make bad people sell something they shouldn't and then wipe them out. So depending on their nature and how they're being guided in their own philosophy, they're going to have a different impact. A Hooded One is just a hacker. Back in the day, if anyone that's watched the movie Hackers, with Angelina Jolie, you remember, Crash and Burn, hackers were bad at one point, but really, how much different was a hacker than the old cypherpunk mailing list? There's actually a lot of good that comes from that. And what's bad about hacking a corrupt entity to reveal its truth? That's not bad at all. So it's all about perspective. So the Hooded Ones are, good or bad, depending on how you interpret them. And then the final character archetype is the day trader. Sorry, the developer. And in this world, when we think about robotics being everywhere, nanotechnology creating or destroying civilizations in weeks instead of centuries, the software developer has a power that it's unprecedented to what we see today. When you can press a couple buttons and control a nuke, that gives a little perspective to the power and strength of a software developer. But in the future, if you can construct or deconstruct an entire civilization using nanotechnology and the software that guides it, it gives a whole different perspective. So the software developer is held as like an atlas in the universe. So I've been writing a whole lore on Substack and developing it out with all the different facets it can go. And CoinLords is the first comic book, a physical comic book that you can hold and keep for yourself to understand what that story could look like. And in the comic is real people from the real world. If you look at that, if you zoom in on that front cover, you might, some of you guys that might represent or recognize Dave Bradley, Bitcoin Brains, or, Ben from BTC Sessions is in there. And the idea is for the next issue to truly represent characters visually that are truly a part of the Bitcoin community. So it's not all just fictional in my mind. It's no, real stories like Planet Gox getting attacked. In other words, Mount Gox getting hacked. Those stories exist in a memified way in the narrative, but also Nico will have a character, right? And Opti has a character, and everyone that is important in the Bitcoin world has a representation in the book as a character, something we can relate to, not just philosophically, ideologically, but also and not just in an entertainment sense, which that's what's going to help it go mass scale, but also in a visual sense, where wow, that's my character. And so the mission here is to continue a true Bitcoiner ideology and philosophically guided narrative into the mainstream as a TV show, as a comic, just like V for Vendetta went from a comic to a TV show, and everything in Marvel started as a comic and went into the movies. To have that evolution happen with a correct representation of Bitcoiner culture. So that's my my little passion hobby I started doing in 2017 when I was building my mining farm back in my garage. Just lying on my back and plugging in Ethernet cables, and I thought, man, a comic book would be cool. So that's really in a nutshell what it is. It's a comic book for Bitcoiners.
I love it. I love sci-fi. I'm a huge. I wouldn't call myself a sci-fi nerd, but I love watching sci-fi movies. They're like some of my favorites because of like the kind of the general idea of like, yes, guys, it is sci-fi, it is make-believe, but it does kind of expand your mind when I loved watching Star Trek or of course Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica. Like those shows, whether they're real or not, I just love being immersed in very I don't know, just like out there ideas of what the world's like, and it makes you think about stuff. So I totally love what you're doing. Though I do have one question in connection to the general theme here before I move on to the next thing you're working on. Without fully, I guess, having a lot of spoilers for what the comic book is saying in it and where it ends and the arc of it. Could you compare it where we are currently? Because I remember you were on the show a couple of months ago, and at the time, it seemed way more out there than it is now. And while you were kind of redoing that, the CoinLords lore, I was like, man, we've come a long way since the last time you came on the show, because a lot of that is almost happening now in real time. And so, anyways, is there a comparison to what the CoinLords lore is saying to where we are now, or? Like, is this maybe the beginning? How would you compare the comic book to where we are in reality?
It's we've taken steps as a species towards exactly the outcome in the comic book, and it's not. I'm not trying to say that I'm prophesizing anything at all. I'm just looking at where we're headed. Where's technology headed, and where's Bitcoin headed, and why, and painting a future that could reflect it. I think. Star Trek did their own version. Star Wars obviously did their own versions. One thing that's interesting, if you think about Star Trek, they're only 200 years in the future when a lot of this really takes place in their storylines, 200-300 years, which isn't a very long time to be looking at manipulating, warp drives and time travel and all this kind of stuff, which, it's very difficult to achieve that as a singular species based on where we're at today. So they really rely on the involvement of alien species that help with their technology that took them thousands of years to develop. And that's how we end up in a Star Trek environment of, pressing a couple buttons and printing a glass of milk out of nowhere, out of thin air, or transporting ourselves. But if we take that away and just look at the trajectory of, how our species is evolving on our own, then we, look at Optimus coming out. And I know that Elon Musk is a polarized topic, so I'm not saying good or bad, but just look at the output. Look at where Optimus is at right now, and look at where AI is today. Even just when I was on the show here before, the advancements are undeniable. The ability to recreate an image or create a new image or create a motion picture or make music. I mean, since I've been on the show last, what Disney and how many other large labels have signed on multi-million-dollar deals with AI musicians. 6 months, 12 months ago, that really wasn't a reality. Like musicians back then and most people were like rejecting this concept of an AI artist being able to take over human production. But no, we're there now. The contracts are signed. The labels are signed. I mean, a lot of my friends out in Nashville are musicians and digesting what it means to now compete with AI producing lyrics that have, hundreds of hours of energy put into 5 seconds of output that can spit out a song and now make $1 million and be signed in a label that's produced by an AI band that, I was watching a dance routine the other day. Anyone that knows me knows that I have a competitive dance background, and seeing humanoid robots doing backflips on a stage and doing a full choreographed dance routine to a large live audience in synchronization with a team of those humanoid robots is it's happened already. So like, and a lot of this again is only 1-2 years old, if that. And if you take that little arc and look at that advancement in 1 to 2 years and amplify it forward exponentially for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, then where we're going to be in the future is completely unrecognizable from where we are today. And that's why, I started on the show here talking about looking at the macro perspective and looking at the 10-year cycle of silver compared to Bitcoin, or looking at just the big picture in general. And I said a lot of that last time I was here too. If we stop looking at the micro in terms of price movement today, or a political move that happened today, and we look at the 10, 20, 30-year trajectory, then we get a really interesting perspective of where we're headed. And I think it's so important to look not just at next year or the next 5 years, but to look at the next 30 or 40 years and ask yourself, where do you want your children to be aligned? What's the future that they're going to be living in? Is if we can't understand where we're going, then how do we understand what decisions make sense for today? And so one thing that I love about the Bitcoin community is that more often than not, we look not even at the distant future, and we can see that the level of political corruption and deconstruction of our dollar and our sense of what wealth really is at a rate that can't be ignored. So we're forced to look at alternative means of storing wealth and a corrective action for our political governing bodies, and that's. And I have to say, anything that you or I don't like in our political system right now, it's really important to take responsibility on an individual level that I helped create the political climate that's unstable right now, and my parents and their parents helped create it. And it's so easy to just point a finger at fill in the blank any political leader and say, look, they're responsible, they're to blame, they're the problem. Right, Jamie Dimon's the problem, or Trump's the problem, or Biden's the problem. Like, it's too easy to do that, because the truth is, if everyone listening onto the show and everyone in the world, if we all agreed to change out a political leader with someone else, and we all just made that decision right now today, it would be done by tomorrow. You can't stop, 100 million people from making a unanimous decision and moving towards it. There's no entity in the planet that can stop an entire population from making a decision in one way or another. That's not possible. So the only thing stopping a political leader from remaining in power is us. And the only thing that allowed them to get there was us as well. Now, maybe we were duped. Maybe we were lied to. Maybe we're being lied to right now. And that's happening, obviously, as we speak in 100,000 different ways. But if we take a second to educate ourselves, by watching Simply Bitcoin, or picking up a book, reading the Bitcoin Standard, and taking a second to understand philosophically what Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged is really about, and really digest that we do not want to be in a 1984 future. If we truly don't want to be in a 1984 future, then what future do we want to be in? And how does that affect all of our actions on a daily basis? How does that affect where I spend my money and where do I buy my groceries and why? And what do I eat? And what do I think of politics? And what do I think of a political figure? Maybe I like Elon Musk or don't like Elon Musk, but what is the impact that his technologies are bringing? And where's ChatGPT headed? Where's Gemini headed? So I really, loop all that back into CoinLord's comic and do my best effort to educate myself on where we're headed if we get on the right track, and where are we headed if we get onto the wrong track. And my best effort to do that was to create different worlds where what does a 1984 world truly look like when it succeeds, and have that represented as an actual planet inside the storyline into its fullest, truest sense, and compare it side by side with what does a Bitcoin world look like? What does an objectivism based universe or planet, I should say, look like that embodies Bitcoin as its core currency? And by default of objectivism mixed with Bitcoin, what does it look like when our political systems actually protect individual rights and enable our productive minds to create like never before? And how does that compare side to side, like I said, with a 1984 future? And then stick in the middle planets that are stuck in between, that can't make up their mind, where you got 100 million people on this side leading left and 100 million on this side on the right, and then another billion stuck in the middle, and no one can make a decision. What does that look like? Does that civilization thrive by default? Does it self-destruct by default? Does it get carried forward by fluke? These are all questions we've got to ask ourselves, because if we can't align on something as a species here, then we are going to be stuck in this weird middle ground. And maybe the future of anyone that's seen the movie Mediocrity, maybe that's going to become our default. If we can't make a decision on our own, then maybe the default takes over. So what is the default, and what does that look like when it expands? Anyways, I ask more questions than I answer, because the purpose here isn't to teach, or it's not to project my own version of what I think we're headed towards. It's to help everyone envision and embody what that looks like for themselves, and what do some of these potential scenarios look like when they unfold. In a side note, you mentioned Battlestar Galactica. I have to point out, in the very, very first page of the comic, there's a scene where you see a prisoner lying on the ground, and there's some numbers that are scratched into the wall. And anyone that's watched the full seasons of Battlestar Galactica, you'll remember when the general, so you remember when the general is being tortured by the Cylons, and spoiler alert, but hey, whatever. If you haven't seen it, it's not my fault.
Yeah, you just go watch the 9 seasons of Battlestar Galactica and get back to us. So
So remember when the general is being tortured in the prison cell, and he's like crawling up, and he's using his fingernail to scratch how many days he's been in the prison as his only source left of sanity. It's the only thing he controls, is to have an understanding of how many days he's been there, because he has no sunlight, no moonlight, no contact with anyone else of his kind, because he still thinks he's human at the time. But then when he gets dragged out down the hallway to be tortured, which again, if you look at page 2 of CoinLord's comic, there's a guy that the prisoner is being dragged down the hallway. The Cylons, remember when they come in and they go and they mess with his mind and they add extra notches?
Yeah.
Just to screw with him, so he actually, he's. Anyways, that scene is represented in the first 2 pages, as well as, if you look really closely at the Easter egg I'm going to throw at you, as the prisoner is being dragged down the hallway, you'll see different doors of prison cells, and those doors have Roman numerals on them, and one of them happens to be V. So part of the storyline is to ask yourself, what if there was another hero in that same cell that V, in that same prison that V was in? What if there's another hero's story that hasn't been told yet? Another person that did liberate their mind, a John Galt of a different storyline. And that's to, and this is, the story that then becomes CoinLords and part of the narrative. So it's to pull these little pieces and Easter eggs from all these things that we see on a today basis or a yesterday basis, and put it into something we can all relate to. So anyways, there's my little rant of CoinLords.
That's awesome, man. That's super cool. Super cool. All right, let's shift gears a little bit, because we were a part of something else that you did, and I don't know if our audience saw this, but Nico and I were totally blown away by this. So Eric, explain what is going on here for the people. Hold on. Hopefully, I'll mute this. What is this? What is going on here?
This is a massive billboard in Nashville, Tennessee, that is part of my company's network. My company is called the Public Board, and this is simply Bitcoin on it. It's 38 feet by 36 feet, 60
So
feet up in the
crazy.
air. It's blasting out to, there's 236,000 people that drive by there every week. There's a social media amplification, and it's pretty darn clear what that says. You can see Simply Bitcoin from an airplane driving by,
Really?
right? Yeah. And
Wow.
so the Public Board it's a company that I started. Actually, I started it in 2020, and the idea was, I used to have a construction company, and every time I tried to advertise or put anything on a billboard, I was stuck with red tape. It was expensive, it was slow, there was emails, it was painful, they were locked up. It was just really painful. And I thought, it's just a screen. Why is it so freaking hard to go on a screen? I would have paid. Now, I'm from Calgary, Alberta, and a lot of freedom stuff going on there, by the way. We can talk
Yeah.
about that if you want. But in Calgary, it's hail capital for Canada, and I did exterior construction. So hail would come down from the sky. I called it money from the sky, and it would just destroy roofs and siding, which would make great money for my teams. And so when a hailstorm would come in, I wanted to be on every billboard in the city right now, and I would have paid anything to do it. But you know what the billboard guys said? Well, first of all, they said nothing. It was crickets, because they take days to get back to you sometimes. And even when I did get through them, they're locked up in contracts for 6 months. No, you can't advertise it. It was all this red tape. If I'm willing to pay anything, why wouldn't someone take it? And that question boggled my mind. So when I sold the construction company and went traveling for a while, I thought, what an interesting concept. What a problem to solve for humanity, right? And if it's just a screen, then we should be able to post on it just like on social media. We should be able to go and do a few clicks and be able to access a digital billboard anywhere across the planet. And so in 2020, I started, I moved out to Silicon Valley, and I went to every city hall from Sacramento to San Jose and started securing a building permit, momentum. But then I had my first meeting with a city hall in San Mateo booked for late March 2020. And you know what happened in March 2020? Lockdown happened. So everything that I invested in that startup was wiped out, and I just took a step back, and I got lost in a whole bunch of things. Last year we came back to it, and there was some pop-up billboards that I basically leased. I leased a 3-sided billboard truck in Denver, and there was and I let it go viral on Twitter. There's like 600 people that posted content on this billboard, and I helped coordinate photos and made it easy and fun. And we went to Portugal, then we went to Japan, and we went to LA. We were at the Alden Summit. I don't know if you listened to the Alden Summit or the Alden podcast, and so we had a billboard inside the Alden Summit venue, right at the front doors. So everyone that was at the summit got to post whatever they want, a message on the billboard. And so then I bought one in North Dakota, and we basically decentralized it. I know that's a weird word, decentralized, but like, to me, billboards are the most public-facing form of communication that exists in the planet. And I say that if you don't want to watch Simply Bitcoin, turn it off, right? If you don't want to see, don't do that, obviously, but you could. You have the power to. If you don't want to see an ad on Facebook, don't use Facebook or put on a blocker. But if you don't want to see a message on a billboard when you're driving down the street, you'd have to close your eyes. And again, I don't recommend you do that. Don't close your eyes when you're driving. But that's the only way to block that out. Because, and this supports my argument, billboards are the most public form of communication that exists on the planet. People cannot ignore. But simultaneously, they're the least accessible to the people that live around them. If you wanted to put "I love Simply Bitcoin" on a billboard right now, what hurdles would you have to go to do that? And that's what I'm trying to solve. I'm trying to connect physical billboards with the communities that live around them in a way that's never been done before. That's unprecedented. Now, billboards are regulated by a different form. Like, we're not protected under the CDA. We don't have that Section 230 protection. We have to be really careful of what goes out there. So we have to be careful about putting a message that'll get us in trouble. We don't want to get billboard operators in trouble. But we can put positive messaging. We can put words of support. We can put what's on our mind in a positive sense. And that's something that I'm trying to change across the world. So this billboard here in Nashville, bless the hearts of the guys that own it. They're fantastic people. I love them to bits, and they've allowed the Public Board to be on there. And Simply Bitcoin being on there is just one tiny little step towards the democratization of billboards across the planet. And I want to do a lot of billboards, Bitcoin related billboard stuff. In fact, I would challenge anyone here, if you got a positive message about that you want to share with the world, or something positive about Bitcoin that you want to share with the world, you can send me a DM, and if I resonate strongly with it, I will put it up there and send you a photo of your message live to the world. And I'm not selling anything when I do this. This isn't a pitch. This is about freedom of speech brought to a form of communication that has been, in many ways, inaccessible to the people that have to look at it every single day. So again, with Simply Bitcoin, man, I want to get some more content from Simply and put it up there. We talked about getting Luke up there with some content that you can't ignore. Let's put it politically correctly in that way. And Opti, if you got a message you want to share with the world on one of the world's biggest and most prominent billboards, let's do it. I can have that up there today and send you a photo tonight, right? So, anyways, I believe deeply in free speech. I believe deeply in opening up access to public forms of communication. And when we look at Uber decentralizing taxis, or Airbnb decentralizing the hotel industry, or Bitcoin, you could say democratizing, financial instruments, I'm working as hard as I freaking can to democratize access to the world's most public form of communication. I spend 80, 90 hours a week doing this nonstop. It's my heart and soul. It's an obsession. It takes over my entire life. And it's just getting started. We've got some cool investment capital from some really powerful guys, like Jason Calacanis from the All In Pod, who's our first angel investor. And we want to take this all the way to thousands of billboards and let everyone listening here be a part of the grassroots movement and share a message on it. And and I'll comp a lot of that. Anyway, so there's my other little project I work on when I'm not doing CoinLord's weird stuff.
Let's go, Eric. That's awesome. I have one question before I have you plug it so people can get in touch with you. Is there audio? Are people hearing audio, or is it just visual?
On this particular billboard is visual and static image only. The board is capable of visual, and you can easily plug speakers into it. I mean, anyone that checks out my social handles for public board, you'll see we do live DJ sets, live concerts. We have musicians playing in front of the board with their content up there. It can support that, but there's distracted driving laws, bylaws that are put in place by the city. So, but not all places. I mean, Vegas doesn't have that, and New York Times Square doesn't. So it depends where you are, right? But so this board is static only, unless you're in Nashville. If you're in Nashville, come meet me out there, and we'll set, I'll get a camera out there. We'll get a drone video. We'll get your content up there and record you speaking in front of it. Again, check out my socials and you'll see some of the fun that we have with billboards. So it's awesome. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. All right, Eric. So I guess plug your Twitter, and then do you have like a website for the billboard? Or, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, if you go to coinlords.com, you'll find my socials there. If you're on Twitter, I mean, if you looked at that social handle there, that where I made that Simply Bitcoin post, that was my CoinLords Twitter account. So CoinLords HQ, and public board is it's just public board, BORED. So public board on Twitter, and same on Instagram. So you can just DM me. I answer all those accounts personally. We're still small enough where you reach me directly. And if you got an idea for a character in the comic, you let me know. If you want to be a part of it, or you want to contribute to the lore, please let me know. Like, it's meant to be a community project, not an individual project. And if you have some Bitcoin related positive message you want to share with the world, drop me a DM in public board, Twitter, or Instagram, and we'll put it up there, and we'll give a voice to people that are listening. So I appreciate you having me on here. And we got issue number 2 coming out for the comic pretty soon. We have the animated version that was coming out. We got a teaser episode that we put out there using some AI to help me advance the animations for it. And the idea is to make it a TV show, make it a movie, mainstream. Again, it's not about me making money. It's about controlling the narrative. It's about giving everyone listening here a chance to be a part of that narrative that then goes out and becomes a Netflix show, or becomes maybe it stays on Rumble, who knows? But anyways, I'm just doing my best effort to live by the ethos. I've strayed off the road, the beaten path, and sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way, but it all comes back leading right to what's the truth here, and what is the path forward for today. And so I've dedicated my life to it. and there's no compromise on it. There's lots of sacrifices, and public board is how you can find me on the socials to join that journey on democratizing, helping people get a stronger voice. And CoinLords is where we can bring that voice in the narrative to the mainstream. So that's where it all comes from. And man, I can't wait to contribute more here in any way that I can. There's a long way to go, and we're literally just getting started.
Let's go, man. Well, you guys know me. I am all for making more Bitcoin propaganda. So, put your hat in the ring and let's all start making some more propaganda out there and get more people to understand why we do. So, Eric, thank you so much for coming on today's show. Let me pull you behind the scenes real quick as I wrap up the episode, and you can hang out and we'll have a combo when I end the show. All right, guys, I'm back. We're back. Today was December 29th. It's not the new year yet, but it already feels like the new year to me. So, 2026 is going to be a good one, guys. I will do my best to pull as much bullishness into the show as possible. I'm sorry you had to deal with the bear last week. Forgive me. I'm sorry. Anyways, on that note, we will be back tomorrow, same time-ish, 12:30-ish, something like that. And of course, we go live Monday through Friday. So, smash the like button, comment on the show, and of course, hit the subscriber button. I will be back tomorrow. Have a good rest of your day. I will see you later.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.